At some point, this will change. At some point, people will say, enough, we can't put up with this. And there will be, if Brexit was the earthquake, I think at some point in time, we're going to see some sort of political revolution.
Hello and welcome to This Week in Review with Nigel Farage. Nigel, much to the great disappointment of economists around the world, the UK avoided recession by the skin of its teeth at the end of last year. Do you think this matters much, or is this just a devil in the detail?
Yes, the IMF must have been very disappointed. They seem to have a huge downer on the UK. I think they want us to join the euro, really. You know what? There's nothing to celebrate here at all. The reason that we're not officially in recession is that growth for the last quarter was a big flat line zero. So there's nothing to cheer us up. We have a budget coming on the 15th of March, so it's just a few weeks down the road. A huge amount of lobbying now going on from business, all business, from small businesses up to the CBI. And the big piece of news last week, business-wise, for the UK economy, was that AstraZeneca, who were about to put 330 million into a plant in Cheshire, have said, you know what, we're out of here. We're going to go to Ireland. We're going to go to the Republic because corporation tax is going to be half in Ireland what it's going to be in the United Kingdom. And you can only describe this as a self-inflicted wound. So right at the minute, I think the prospects for the UK economy are we're going to continue with extremely low growth right throughout this year, with business investment at really miserable, disappointing levels, and a productivity crisis that nobody appears to even have the will to address. Now, I do think that the Chancellor could turn this round a bit by beginning to send some positive messages to investors and business. I just don't think he's got the imagination to do it. I think he's been completely captured by the globalist agenda, a completely part of the Treasury orthodoxy. And I have to say, as somebody who thought Brexit was all about, in economic terms, making us more competitive, they've simply, as a Tory government, done nothing. So I'm sorry to say that it's all a little bit depressing.
It's just another example of failing to diverge, which was the whole point of Brexit, really. Just think, Nigel, if you'd bought one less pint of beer during those last 3 months of 2022, then we would have been in recession because of economic growth would have been just that slightly bit less than zero, and that's the difference, which I think highlights just how stupid all of that discussion is. Did the US blow up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline?
Well, it's funny, isn't it, how so many conspiracy theories in the end appear to be true. And the evidence is mounting that they did. I mean, Biden did actually say once, a year or so back, that is what they would do. Then it happened, and he kind of refuses to give any answers because he doesn't want to get caught to be lying, which, I fully understand. But increasingly, it looks like they did, all of which really does make you question very heavily a lot of American interventionist foreign policy. But you see, we're back to where we were. We're back to American regimes that want to get involved with Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, actions like this. And, I'm going to say it again. Trump was, the first president for a couple of decades not to take America into wars. Yes, there were a couple of bombing raids on Syria after the use of chemical weapons, but basically, he was a non-interventionist president, and we're back into intervention. The odd thing about this Nord Stream story is that the clearer it becomes that America did it, the less commentary there is in the media about it. It's very, very odd indeed. But, I think we have to be the Americans are our closest ally, but I do think at times when it comes to foreign policy and interventions, we have to be very, very cautious about what we agree to.
You'll understand this idea of the ability of a politician to not be held accountable sort of is directly correlated to how long they can delay their accountability. And they're getting quite good at that, it seems to me, where, bits of information are delayed, or the reaction is suppressed, or the decision is deferred, so that nobody's ever actually held accountable at the ballot box for decisions or lacks of decisions. And it seems to me they're getting good at that. They're getting very good at it.
Well, look at lockdown. I mean, the more evidence that emerges is that lockdown was probably the biggest domestic policy error for, well, I can't think. I really can't think for how many decades. The huge physical, mental, educational, social, and I can go on with a list as long as your arm, harms that it did to the country. But what's clear is that nobody will ever be held accountable. One or two people might go to prison over PPE contracts being given the government mate, maybe, but actual accountability for a decision, first lockdown, we'll forgive them. All right, we didn't know what was coming down the track. We'll forgive them that. But to go on locking us down again and again, when it was perfectly clear that Sweden, Florida, and other countries were taking a different path with far less damage and exactly the same rates of infection and death. So yeah, I think it's funny really, but the whole political insurgency that really kicked off 10 years ago that I was very much a part of, it wasn't just about leaving the European Union. It was actually about the way we're governed. The fact people are totally out of touch. And that's one of the even bigger disappointments of Brexit, is we've gone back to the bad old days. Hey, we have a prime minister who, whilst in office, still had a green card to go to America, and whose wife was a non-dom. How detached from ordinary voters can you be? So yeah, at some point this will change. At some point, people will say, enough, we can't put up with this. And there will be, if Brexit was the earthquake, I think at some point in time, we're going to see some sort of political revolution. I'm not sure how far away it is, but the closer the two parties get to each other, the more I think that's a possibility.
I wonder if one has started in Scotland.
Very interesting. I mean, the SNP have had it all their own way for such a long time. And Salmond, whatever his personal flaws may be, a larger-than-life character, a very good debater. Sturgeon, cold, harsh, on a personal level, one of the most unpleasant people I've ever met in my life. And I really mean that. And absolutely vile is my view of it. But this superiority and the arrogance that comes, you see, there was no accountability there because the margins were so big. Winning 50 seats in Westminster, majorities in Holyrood, despite the system being designed not to give anybody outright majorities. But two or three factors here. I mean, one, of course, is growing restlessness within the party. We saw the Westminster boss going just a couple of months ago. The second is the dark money stuff. The £100,000 that her husband lent the party, interestingly, to cover a libel bill that was due to Richard Tice and I. So we were very much involved in this, but wasn't declared. And then the 600 grand that was raised in 2017 that didn't go towards a second referendum, but seemed to go into SNP party coffers. All of that was bubbling away in the background. But, and this is the good bit, the completely loopy new gender recognition legislation that led to big splits in her party, we polled it at the time it was going through. And only 19% of Scots supported it. Over 80% of Scotland thought it was ridiculous. And yet she carried on regardless, believing that she knew what was best. And then what happened? A bloke, a double rapist, turns up in court wearing a wig, says I'm now a woman, and Nicola thinks that individual should go to a woman's prison. And suddenly, the pendulum against woke lunacy swung back very, very rapidly, exposing all the other problems with money and everything else. And I sometimes think that for those who believe in the Christian values that have underpinned our societies, for those that believe the family is a very important unit, for those that believe in our history, our culture, our heritage, it's been so depressing for the last couple of years because we appear to lose. What this shows is that when pendulums swing back the other way, they do so very quickly. So I think it's a very joyous piece of news. And with it, Scottish separation now 12 points behind in the latest polls. I think the union is safe. Some English viewers of this will say, oh dear, That means my money's going to keep going north of Hadrian's Wall. The union's safe. And the real sort of final thought on this week's current affairs is it seems to have been Keir Starmer's birthday. The Labour Party have never had a majority government in the United Kingdom without owning a majority of seats in Scotland. The SNP wiped, in the Blair years, they had 44, 45 MPs. They were wiped down to 1 or 2. There's now a very realistic prospect, I think, and Labour, interestingly in Scotland, now ticking above 30% in the polls for the first time in many, 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 many years. And the chance now that Labour could pick up 20, 25 seats in Scotland changes the whole arithmetic for the next general election. I mean, it now looks more certain there'll be a Labour majority than it did this time a week ago. So, yeah, Keir Starmer's dreams have all come at once.
Be careful what you wish for, and double-edged sword and all that.
I didn't say I wanted it, but it does look ever more that way.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Everyone home, thanks for watching, and Nigel, thanks for joining us again.